This is Visionary, a show exploring how nuclear powers your world. I'm Mary Carpenter.
And I'm Jordan Houghton. Let's jump in. Hi, Mary. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm very interested to speak with our guest today. He is Jesus Nunez, the CEO of the Nuclear Alternative Project, and he grew up in Puerto Rico. And his goal is to bring nuclear to Puerto Rico to help stabilize their electrical grid, which is oftentimes and has been, you've all seen it in the news, intermittent because of the impacts of hurricanes around the island.
Puerto Rico's faced a lot of challenges in recent years because of these horrible weather events. I know part of the reason that Jesus started the Nuclear Alternative Project was because of Hurricane Irma in 2017, and then they were quickly struck again a couple weeks later by Hurricane Maria, and that caused absolute devastation on the island. And, you know, the cell sites were down, their water waste treatment plants weren't operable, there were landslides, the roads were impassable, most of the island lacked clean drinking water. And on top of this, 100% of their electricity grid was down. So he, you know, growing up there, thought that this was a critical opportunity for him to do something, to step in and find a way to make their grid more stable as they continue to face these disasters. And he thought nuclear would be the best solution to do that.
I think that it's a really important conversation to have right now because extreme weather events are impacting people all over the globe. We're sitting here now recording this conversation during an extreme heat wave that is threatening energy security, not only in the United States, but across the globe. Places that don't usually face extreme heat are dealing with it right now. And I just think it's really important to consider how nuclear has the ability to be a strong backbone to the grid when there are extreme weather events.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this episode during hurricane season, you know, as we're tracking hurricanes that are currently forming right now. So, you know, living in DC, we're not usually hit by hurricanes. You know, we've had some weather events. We had a derecho probably like 5 or 10 years ago now. And I remember the wind just knocked power out for the whole city. And this was in the middle of the summer and it was so hot. But I was fortunate that I had power. So I had people sleeping all over my condo because they didn't have air conditioning for several days. But, you know, most of the time we just go by with our regular days. You know, our cell phones are charged, we can watch TV, our air conditioning's on, and you don't think about it until a disaster happens that, you know, you really do need this reliability in the grid to make it through regular days as well as disasters.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest and I dealt with power outages all the time. In the winter, there were blizzards that would knock out power. In the summer, we would have severe storms, sometimes tornadoes that would knock out power, and I would lose power for, 2 to 3 days. Sometimes it was only half a day, and I thought I was going to lose it. It's horrible no matter what the season is, because you're freezing in the winter and it's too hot in the summer. And I remember this one blizzard that hit when I was in high school, and we lost power for 4 or 5 days, and that was the longest that I had ever been without power. And it felt, of course, I was like a high school girl, so I was very concerned about how I was going to wash my hair.
Of course. Tragedy.
Yes, tragedy. And I realized like what a first world problem I was experiencing. But my husband is from Miami and actually was there during Hurricane Andrew and didn't have power for 3 months.
Oh my God. In Miami?
Yes, in the middle of the summer.
Oh.
And so it made me think about how my 2-day power outages were really nothing compared to that.
Yeah. And then that's like, even compared to 3 months, like that was nothing compared to what Puerto Rico had. So
exactly. He told me that they used to run around the block in the house to get really hot and sweaty before they'd go take a shower because they only had cold water for the showers. So they tried to get themselves like sweltering hot so that the cold water didn't feel as cold.
Which honestly probably wasn't hard to do in Miami in the middle of summer.
Correct. But I think a lot of us, we have the benefit of when we turn on the light switch, the power comes on. And if we do lose power here, it's usually a minor inconvenience. But it seems like more and more we're seeing more hurricanes that are knocking out power for months and months upon end in places like Puerto Rico, or there was the issue with the Texas grid during winter a couple of years ago where they were without power in frigid temperatures. It's like nobody can ignore this anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, we continue to message how nuclear is critical for climate change. So, nuclear really comes into play addressing the underlying issue of these severe storms that we're getting and we're continuing to see get worse. And it also addresses, how nuclear can power through storms and be there to power recovery. And that's actually something interesting that maybe listeners don't know, but with advanced nuclear, we have small reactors, we have microreactors, and the microreactors especially are going to be very easy to transport. So you put them on ships, you can put them on trucks, and you can take it to places like Puerto Rico where the power is out for an extended period of time. And, while you're working to reset up the grid, you can have these microreactors power communities on their own. So there's a lot of different ways that nuclear plays into this conversation.
That's a great point about smaller and micro reactors, because not only does that help in a place like Puerto Rico where they need power because of an outage, but that's critical for powering rural areas as well. I think that's another thing that is taken for granted. People who live in large cities or around metropolitan areas have reliable access to power, but there are still a lot of rural areas in this country and around the world where they don't. And bringing micro reactors to those communities can literally change their lives.
That's so true. And we're excited to get those online and start powering those communities.
Let's jump in with our guest today, Jesus. We are thrilled to welcome Jesus Nunez to the podcast today. He is the CEO of the Nuclear Alternative Project and a senior structural engineer at Bechtel. Jesus, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm hoping to kick things off. You can give us a little bit of your background and how you got here.
So a little bit of my background. I grew up in Puerto Rico. I was born there. I studied in the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, did my bachelor degree there and my master degree. And when I was doing my master degree, I got the opportunity to work with Bechtel in the nuclear industry. It has been 15 years since that happened. But also during that, after 5 or 6 years in Bechtel, I had the opportunity to be part of this nonprofit organization, the Nuclear Alternative Project, and currently I'm the chief executive officer. I'm running the nonprofit.
Jesus, that's great. I want to back up just a little bit. Growing up on an island, what was the power situation like? Were most people connected to the grid?
So when I was growing up, everyone that I knew was connected to the grid. Maybe you have some minor houses that are very remote in the island that didn't have the capability to connect to the grid, but I think almost everyone was connected to the grid. During my first years growing up, I think the grid was not as bad as it is now. It was better, but certain situations between the governance of the system and maintenance issues, and they didn't update a lot of the generation assets. It started to deteriorate to a point that where we are now, right? That people are having more blackouts and it's affecting the economy and every person living in the island.
So when you were growing up, just a normal day, did you have those power outages or when did those start?
We probably had some outages of 1 or 2 hours, 3 hours max between weeks, but it was not as constant as it is now, right?
I know you were there for Hurricane George, And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that experience was like.
So Hurricane George, it was kind of interesting because my mom house is in a small town in the rural area, a mountainous area called Sidra. The hurricane eye passed through our home. So when the hurricane eye was on top of our home, we went outside and then we looked outside and everything was calmed down and everything. Obviously, there was a lot of damage. Also, the wind affected a lot the distribution system of the grid. I was in high school at that time, and we were without electricity 1 or 2 months. The thing is, in Puerto Rico, when there is no electricity, because you have a lot of difference in elevations, some of the places don't get water because the water needs electricity they need to pump it up.
I believe it was something like 96% of the island was without power at some point or another during that hurricane.
And yeah, it affected the lives of people. School, we were going to school and we were getting out instead of 3 o'clock. We were getting out at lunchtime because we didn't have water services. So yeah, it did affect the daily life of everyone.
We talk a lot in this industry about how people take power for granted. When you live in a place where the lights always turn on when you flip the switch, it's almost hard to imagine not having power for that long. But that is reality for a lot of people, even not in natural disasters in rural areas, etc.
Yeah, it is a reality in Puerto Rico right now. I was listening at the news, and this past week and this week, there is a heat wave in Puerto Rico. And a lot of the transmission lines are getting overstressed because of the heat. A lot of the generation assets, the big ones that we have, they were scheduled to do maintenance. I just read on news that the coal plant that is there, that is planned to shut down in the next 2 or 3 years. They asked the plant manager not to do the maintenance, routine maintenance, because they are running very low on the reserve margin. I heard yesterday it was less than 100 megawatt at the reserve margin. They're having a lot of issues, not only in the transmission and distribution portion of it, but also the generation. They're having a low margin in the electricity market, and that's affecting everyone's lives.
This experience you had, going to school without power, did that play into kind of where you are today in the field that you're in?
Since the beginning of when I was growing up, I always told my mom I was going to be an engineer. When I was in my master's degree, I did never expect to get out of Puerto Rico to work. And this opportunity happened with Bechtel, and I just continued to follow it. When the opportunity became to make the Nuclear Alternative Project nonprofit organization, I saw it as an opportunity to kind of give back something that I was learning here in the mainland and give it back to people in Puerto Rico, since I know that the industry was not really open in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so I want to learn more about the Nuclear Alternative Project. So I know in 2015 you were contacted by some college friends about the idea of starting the project. I love that your friend asked you, how is it that no one is talking about advanced reactors to help solve Puerto Rico's energy problems? From an engineering standpoint, these reactors make so much sense. They are smaller and with all the safety enhancements from previous generation designs. So after your friend contacted you, what happened next? How did this project start?
I was actually Eddie Guerra. He's a friend of mine now. He contacted me. I was driving back from work from Virginia, and he contacted me, and we were discussing this, and he just said, "Hey, would you like to be part of this organization?" And obviously, I talked with my wife about it, and I said yes. Started very small. We started trying to make our bylaws and all the things that we needed to do, our mission, our logo, and all those things. And then, the process started to getting bigger, especially when Puerto Rico got hit by a hurricane. That we saw it as a Hurricane Maria. That we saw it as probably points of where we started doing more work and educating more people about it and studying the nuclear energy for Puerto Rico.
You mentioned Hurricane Maria Irma and Maria hit in 2017, which is not long after you started the Nuclear Alternative Project. And that led to, as some people were without power for almost a year, I believe, during the aftermath of those hurricanes. How did that make you feel in the time? As someone who was from Puerto Rico, grew up there, what was your feelings when you were seeing people live through that?
My mom was in Puerto Rico at that time. She was staying by herself. So I didn't have contact with my mom like for 2 weeks. I have been through Georges, so we were used to it. But when Hurricane Maria happened and I saw that communication from the island was zero, I knew my mom was okay. She lives in a reinforced concrete home and all that outside the flooding areas. But, it's very stressing. You've been here, you cannot do anything about it. And I think that motivates me and others in our group to do a little more, even if it's in our own time, right? We do this in our own time. Kind of motivate us to continue educating and studying this possibility for Puerto Rico. The road is not straight, right? There are challenges and we cannot solve all the challenges, but our mission and our compromise is to educate people in Puerto Rico and to make sure they understand how the nuclear with advanced reactors could be a possibility and something that helps them in the future.
That's a great transition, I think, for you to talk a little bit about why you see nuclear as such a optimistic and great solution for natural disaster recovery, especially in Puerto Rico.
So for Puerto Rico, like if you see what happened during Hurricane Maria and even Georges, the problem is you can have big portions of the island being shut down by these hurricanes because either the transmission line get knocked down or the distribution lines get knocked down. If you see through both hurricanes, there was a need of having generators, right? And especially during Hurricane Maria, those generators, they need diesel, right? They need a constant refueling of diesel. I see the nuclear industry with these new technologies in the near future. That could be an asset that Puerto Rico could use to power the critical infrastructure of the island and avoid what happened during Hurricane Maria, that a lot of people died not during the hurricane, just after that, because they didn't have power for the hospitals or critical infrastructure.
So following Hurricane Maria, what did NAP do? How did your organization react?
So what we did, we were already engaged with the community. We started conversations, but what we did, we submitted an unsolicited proposal to the Department of Energy to do a preliminary study about advanced reactors for Puerto Rico. And we got funded for that, for a portion of what we really wanted to do. We started educating people about, when we finished the study, we start educating people about what we found and how this could be a possibility in the future of the island. And, we continue the engagement. We are volunteers. We do the best we can to push and educate people about it.
That's really great. You're doing something. It seems like a lot has changed since 2017 and the hurricane. A Bloomberg article from 2022 reported that since 2017, the federal government has spent $12.8 billion to modernize Puerto Rico's electric grid. Have you seen real changes happen? Has anything actually improved?
There is a lot of changes in the transmission distribution lines that they need to do. And some of the equipment they have to change is not something that you can buy in Walmart, right? It takes some time to get it there. These are big projects. So I think people probably, that's why they're getting anxious about it, because they think that they can be changed in a month. I think there is some improvement in terms of the bureaucracy of it.
So with all this change to the energy grid in Puerto Rico, how do we get nuclear involved in Puerto Rico?
The feedback I have get from people, obviously there will be always people that they don't like nuclear, right? There is always a question about the used fuel, being Puerto Rico so small, how you can manage that. I think the path for Puerto Rico to have nuclear is first have one here in the States and for politicians and people that are the ones that make decisions in Puerto Rico to see it working and show the people, and then also continue educating the people. I think in parallel, there were some students in the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez that they started the ANS chapter. They already are pushing for, they are starting to start some courses in nuclear engineering on August. It's not the entire program. It's not like a bachelor degree or a PhD in nuclear, but it's a start. Like the students are interested. They would like to be part of this. And I think that's how this start coming together, right? Like we are putting only a grain in there, and some other people are doing their work. And at the end of the day, like I tell people, like if nuclear is for Puerto Rico, it will happen. It will take time and education, and the politicians need to be part of it. And right now they still don't feel confident because they want the people to feel confident first, right?
I read in your feasibility study that nuclear has like 94% of the population interested, though. That's impressive. I mean, considering that it's not a place where people have grown up around nuclear, live around nuclear. What do you attribute that to?
So I attribute that was done after Maria. Just imagine yourself, right? You live in an area that you are without electricity for a year. And then you bring a technology that could help you, and you want to understand if this could help you, right? So people were more open to solutions when Hurricane Maria passed. After that, recent earthquakes and all that, probably that number is not the same, right? Because people get more scared because of earthquakes, because there were some earthquakes happening when we were finishing the study. But I attribute that to that's not picture of that moment of people getting out of the Hurricane Maria, being without electricity for a year, say, hey, I mean, we need whatever works, right?
Do you think most people on the island are thinking more along the lines of traditional nuclear, larger power plants? Do they understand that there's new nuclears coming and it could be a great option, for more remote areas on the island? Is that something people know about, or is that something that an education campaign would be helpful?
There's still people that relate nuclear engineering to weapons in Puerto Rico, especially people that are opposed to it. They still also relate it to the big nuclear, obviously, to the 1,000 megawatt electric plants, because, we get asked a lot about, hey, if something happened, we have to evacuate the entire island because we are 100 by 40 miles and there is an emergency planning zone of 15 miles radius for a nuclear plant, right, for the big ones. They still relate that. They still have those relations. And also, the media, obviously there is a big renewables hype in Puerto Rico. So the media doesn't touch the topic of nuclear. And when they touch it, it's not for something good, right? So we have to continue educating. A big educational campaign would be better because people will see that, hey, this is what is coming, right? And that's what we're doing. Like recently, I was in Puerto Rico. I'm part of the College of Engineers and Surveyors of Puerto Rico. It's an organization that has been in Puerto Rico for 85 years. In order for being an engineer in Puerto Rico, you need to be a member of that organization by law. And I was with them, and we're engaging to bring the nuclear engineering topics to all the other engineers that are interested to learn about it. They have people that have worked in this industry in the 60s. They have people that work in the reactor in Bonus, in the island, the experimental reactor that we have. They're interested, but also they are cautious because they have seen other technologies not being successful, right? So they want this to be successful, and they see this as a possibility for future in Puerto Rico.
What do you see as the nuclear alternative project's next goal? What are your short-term goals? What are you trying to accomplish next?
We're continuing educating people. What we want is people to get outside of the box of what the typical media promotes, right? And we want those people to look at nuclear and look at the technology, look at the challenges, and also at the benefits of what nuclear provides, and to make a decision based on that, and not on some expert opinion that we have it in the island, like in the U.S. mainland, right? That they come and they go to the media and people get scared, everything without any real technical information. So we're trying to do that. Another thing that we're doing, we're going to do a preliminary economic analysis of how this could impact the islands. We have an economist helping us with that. It will be a small document, but it will give some picture of how advanced nuclear reactors could help the island in the near future if Puerto Rico implements them economically.
So we talked a lot about disasters today. Disasters aside, why do you think that nuclear would be a good answer to power harder to reach areas like an island, but also in the mountains, in the desert?
I think it's because of the refueling cycle that you have, right? Especially Puerto Rico, like right now, like they're having a lot of issues when the war in Russia happened between Russia and Ukraine. There was a shortage of natural gas, right? And they needed to, instead of running their plants with natural gas, they start running the ones that run with diesel and other fossil fuels that they were more expensive. I mean, when you have a remote area and if you don't have a reliable source of energy and you have a very small amount of plants that could be good when one of the plants can shut down because of some uncertainties, then you need something like nuclear that is very reliable and is running 24/7 compared to other sources of energy that their capacity factors are way less than that.
Is there anything we haven't asked that you think is important to cover before we wrap up?
Before Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico was not really in the picture of a lot of people in the States, right? And I think it could be because of, political status of where we are right now. We're unincorporated territory. And I think people in the mainland should take seriously what Puerto Rico can provide to the table, right? And help out. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of things that Puerto Ricans probably they haven't experienced. We do have a lot of people without good experience. Now there are a lot of Puerto Ricans like me in the private industry working in nuclear. We have a lot of people in Nuclear Regulatory Commission that are from Puerto Rico. And you can transfer that knowledge to people in the island and help out. That's
really great feedback and so important as the nuclear industry looks to develop its future workforce as well. We want to see nuclear power scale up, and we need people to staff the plants and to bring it to life, bring it online.
All right. One last question. Describe the future of nuclear energy in one word.
I define it as nuclear revolution.
Revolution. I love that.
We have the Industrial Revolution, but I think people are focusing probably in the wrong technologies right now. I think nuclear will be the future of the world.
Thank you again, Jesus, for all the work you and the rest of the team at the Nuclear Alternative Project are doing.
I hope we can revisit this conversation down the road and talk about how much nuclear has positively impacted Puerto Rico.
If you want to keep up to date with the work that the Nuclear Alternative Project is doing, you can find them on social media and, of course, their website, nuclearalternativeproject.org.
Don't forget to follow us and leave feedback wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.